It's funny. We spend a massive amount of our mental energy worrying about our environment. We stress about the air quality index. We obsess over the thermostat in our living rooms. Is it 72 degrees? Is it 70?
Oh, with the perfect temperature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we filter our tap water because we're terrified of what might be in it. We build these elaborate houses, with HVAC systems, just to keep the outside world at bay.
It's human nature, isn't it? We crave stability. We like control.
We do. But I want to start today by completely flipping that perspective. I want you to look in the mirror and realize that, biologically speaking, you are not a solid object walking through the world.
Oh.
You are a tank.
A tank. That is a provocative way to put it. A bit industrial, maybe.
But is it wrong?
Physiologically, no. It is entirely accurate.
It was the only way I can really wrap my head around this topic. We tend to think of our cells, the little engines that make up our liver, our heart, our brain, as living inside us. As if us is this dry, solid structure made of bone and muscle. But they don't live in bone and muscle. They live in water.
They live in the fluid that fills the spaces inside us.
Yes.
And this brings us right to the core concept for today's deep dive. It's an idea that it actually dates all the way back to the 19th century, to the famous French physiologist Claude Bernard. He coined this term, milieu intérieur.
The internal environment.
Or, a bit more poetically, the internal sea. And the premise is just fascinating. Our cells are essentially aquatic creatures.
They need to swim.
They need to swim. Evolutionarily, single-celled organisms lived in the ocean. They had infinite water, stable salt all around them. It was perfect.
Paradise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when complex life moved onto land, we couldn't just leave the ocean behind. Our cells still needed that bath. So we developed a way to bring the ocean with us.
We carry a personal, portable sea for our cells to live in.
That's it. And here's the kicker, as you say. Just like a tropical fish in a home aquarium, if that water gets too salty or too hot, or if the tank starts to leak and the water level drops,
the fish dies.
The fish or cells die. They are incredibly fragile. They can't handle the dry air or the fluctuating temperature of the outside world. They are completely helpless without that perfectly maintained fluid.
So the human body has to be this incredibly sophisticated environmental engineering system.
That's the perfect framing for it. We aren't just memorizing anatomical parts today. We are talking about life support. We're talking about how the body maintains that internal sea so that it doesn't become a toxic swamp or a dried up desert.
That is our mission today.
Yeah.
We are going to explore the environmental engineering of the human body. And to guide us through this marvel of biology, we're synthesizing two absolute giants in the field of medical physiology.
The Bibles.
The Bibles. These are the books that every doctor has on their shelves, usually gathering a bit of dust until they need to remember how the kidney actually works.
Right. So first up, we're pulling from Ganong's review of medical physiology. Ganong is just brilliant for the nitty-gritty, the cellular triggers, the receptors, the real molecular precision of it all.
And we are pairing that with the legendary Guyton and Hall textbook of medical physiology.
Guyton. Guyton is fantastic for the systems engineering perspective. He looks at flow, pressure dynamics, the math of survival. He really sees the body as a kind of hydraulic machine.
A beautifully complex tank.
A beautifully complex tank, yes.
So here is our roadmap for this deep dive. We are going to start with the blueprint, the layout of the tank itself. Where is all this water?
The fluid compartments.
Right. Then we're going to look at the defense of tonicity, which is basically how the brain stops us from turning into a pickle when we eat too much salt.
A very important defense.
Very. Then we have to talk about the engine, the kidney. But not just it filters blood. We need to understand how it manipulates water. It's not as simple as a sieve.
Not at all. It's an active process.
After that, we'll tackle the defense of volume blood pressure, sodium, and the famous RAS system.
Which sounds like a villain from a sci-fi movie.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it's actually saving your life right now. And finally, the electrical stakes of potassium regulation, which is literally a matter of life and death for every single heartbeat.
It's a complex system, a lot of moving parts, but when you see how it all connects, it's genuinely beautiful. It's a study in trade-offs, speed versus precision, volume versus concentration.
Let's jump in. Section 1, the blueprint. We need to define the tank. The sources mention a specific rule of thumb for water in the body. The 60-40-20 rule.
The 60-40-20 rule, yes.
Break that down for us, but don't just give me the math. Give me the visualization.
Okay, let's visualize it.
Yeah.
The foundational equation is that total body water is roughly 60% of your body weight.
60%.
So if you are a standard 70-kilogram person, about 32 liters of you is just water.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, imagine 21 of those big 2-liter soda bottles strapped to your body. That's you. That's the water you're carrying around.
That's a lot of sloshing. That's hard to picture.
It is. But that water isn't just sloshing around in one big bucket like a water balloon. It's strictly divided.
It's compartmentalized.
It has to be. You need to separate the clean water from the dirty water, so to speak.
So what's the first big division?
The first major division is the intracellular fluid, or ICF. That's the 40 in our 60-40-20 rule.
Yeah.
40% of your body weight.
Okay, so most of it.
The vast majority. If you do the math, that's 2/3 of all the water in your body. It's a huge amount.
And where is this water specifically? What does intracellular mean here?
It is inside the cell membranes. Think of this as the sanctuary.
The inner sanctum.
Exactly. This is the water inside your muscle cells, your liver cells, your neurons. This is where the chemistry of life actually happens. Protein synthesis, energy production, all of it. This environment needs to be pristine. It needs to be stable.
Okay, so 40% is locked away in the sanctuary. That leaves 20% for the internal C we talked about.
Correct. That's the extracellular fluid, or ECF. That's the remaining 1/3 of your water, or roughly 20% of your body weight. This is the environment bathing the cells. It's the fluid outside the walls of the sanctuary.
But the ECF isn't just one big puddle either, is it?
No, and this is where it gets really nuanced, and this distinction is absolutely critical for understanding medicine. The ECF is subdivided again.
Okay.
You have the interstitial fluid.
Which is what?
That's the actual bathwater. It's the fluid immediately surrounding the cells sitting between the tissues, the true milieu interior.
Got it. The bathwater and the other part.
The other part is the plasma.
The fluid in the pipes.
Exactly, the fluid in the blood vessels. Now, Guyton makes a really crucial distinction here about the walls separating these compartments. We have two main walls in this whole tank system.
Okay. Wall number one.
First, there is the capillary wall. This is the wall between the plasma, the blood, and the interstitial fluid, the bathwater.
And is that a solid wall? Like a brick wall?
Not at all. It's highly permeable. Think of it like a very, very loose sieve or maybe a mesh fence.
So things can get through.
Oh, yeah. Water, salt, glucose, waste products, they all flow back and forth freely between the blood and the tissue fluid. The only thing it really holds back is big, bulky stuff like proteins.
So practically speaking, the plasma and the interstitial fluid are basically the same liquid.
Chemically, they are almost identical, except for those proteins stuck in the blood. They are mixing constantly. If you inject salt into someone's blood, it equilibrates with the interstitial fluid almost instantly. It's one big mixing pot.
Okay, so that's the first wall of the sieve. What's the second wall?
The second wall is the cell membrane, the wall between the ECF, the C, and the ICF, the sanctuary.
And is that a sieve too?
Absolutely not. That is a fortress.
Okay.
It is highly, highly selective. It lets water pass through easily. It actually has special channels just for water, but it is very, very strict about salts. It works tirelessly to keep potassium in the cell and to keep sodium out of the cell.
Why does that matter so much? Why can't they just mix?
Because that separation, that difference in salt concentration, creates a battery. We'll get to this later with potassium, but life itself depends on that electrical difference. However, because water can move through that wall so easily, we run into a major physics problem.
The physics of survival.
Whoa.
Osmosis.
Exactly. Osmosis.
I feel like we all learned this in high school biology with
Yeah.
potato slices, right? You put a potato in salt water and it gets floppy. You put it in fresh water and it gets stiff.
Right.
But the stakes here are a little bit higher than a potato.
Much, much higher. And we should probably clarify the terms first, because the sources use both of them. Osmolarity
Right.
and osmolality.
Oh boy, I always mix these up.
Don't worry, most people do, and for our purposes, it's not a huge deal. Technically, osmolarity is osmoles per liter of solution, and osmolality is osmoles per kilogram of water. In a chemistry lab where you have varying temperatures and pressures, that difference matters because volume changes with heat. But in the human body, the fluids are dilute enough that the terms are functionally interchangeable.
Okay, good. So we don't need to get out the calculator for that. We're usually talking about a target of what, around 300?
About 280 to 300 milliosmoles per liter. That is the set point for human life.
Okay, so we'll stick to osmolarity for simplicity. But tell us about the tyranny of osmosis. Why do you call it a tyranny?
Because water is a slave to solute. That is the golden rule of the body. Water will always move to dilute salt. It's an unstoppable physical force. You cannot argue with it.
Give me a scenario.
Okay. Imagine you have a cell floating in the ECF. Suddenly, you eat a ton of salt and you don't drink any water. The ECF becomes hypertonic. It gets too salty.
So the outside world for that cell is now saltier than the inside.
Right. And nature hates a gradient. It wants to balance that out. But remember, the cell wall, that fortress, it won't let the salt in to balance it.
Yeah.
So the only option is for the water to leave.
The water rushes out of the sanctuary.
It rushes out into the sea to try and dilute all that salt. And what happens to the cell?
It shrivels. It shrinks.
It dehydrates. It physically shrinks. The machinery inside gets all cramped and crowded. It just stops working.
And the reverse. What if you drink way too much pure water?
If you drink gallons of distilled pure water with no salt, your ECF becomes hypotonic. It's too watery. Now, the inside of the cell looks salty by comparison.
So the water rushes in?
It floods the sanctuary, the cell swells up, it bloats, and if it swells too much, it can literally burst. It can lyse.
And Guyton points out something really scary about this, which is the time factor.
Yes, this is what makes it a true emergency. This fluid transfer isn't a slow seep that happens over days. It happens in seconds to minutes.
Wow.
If your ECF composition changes, your cells feel it now. There is no delay.
That sets the stakes perfectly. It's not just about being hydrated in a general sense. It's about keeping your cells the exact right physical size so they don't explode or implode.
That's it. We regulate the extracellular fluids solely to protect the volume of the cells. The body doesn't care about the ECF for the ECF's sake. It cares about the sanctuary.
So let's look at how the body actually defends against this.
Okay.
Section 2. The defensive tonicity. Let's go back to that scenario. I just ate a massive bag of salty pretzels at a baseball game. And let's say I haven't drunk water all day. My ECF is getting salty, my cells are starting to shrink and panic. What happens?
You need a sensor. You can't fix a problem you don't detect. And the sensors here are the osmoreceptors.
Osmoreceptors, okay.
These are highly specialized neurons located in a part of the brain called the anterior hypothalamus, right near the supraoptic nuclei.
It sounds like a generic sci-fi term, osmoreceptor. How do they sense saltiness? Do they, taste the blood?
In a mechanical sense, yes, but it's more physical than taste. Remember osmosis.
Mm-hmm.
When the ECF becomes hypertonic too, salty water is sucked out of every cell in the body, and that includes these osmoreceptor cells in the brain.
So the sensor itself shrinks.
Exactly. They physically shrink. And that mechanical shrinkage pulls on the cell membrane, opening up ion channels that trigger electrical firing. It is a mechanical to electrical transducer.
That is wild. It's like a tiny biological tripwire.
And Ganong highlights the precision here. It's just mind-blowing. A change in osmolality of only 1% is enough to trigger a response.
1%. That's incredible engineering. Most man-made sensors aren't that stable or that sensitive.
It has to be. If it waits for a 10% change, your brain cells might already be permanently damaged.
So the alarm goes off. The tripwire is pulled. What does the body do?
It has two effectors. One is behavioral and one is hormonal. The behavioral one is the one you feel. Thirst.
Wow.
You get a conscious, nagging desire to drink water.
Which seems so simple. I feel dry, I drink. But it's actually a specific command from the brain.
It is. The thirst center in the hypothalamus overlaps with the osmoreceptors. Interestingly, the threshold for thirst is a bit higher than the hormonal response. Sodium usually has to rise about 2 milliequivalents per liter above normal before you feel that powerful urge to drink.
So by the time I actually feel thirsty, the system is already working in the background to fix the problem.
Exactly. You are already dehydrated by the time you are actively looking for a water fountain. The background system is effector number 2, vasopressin.
Vasopressin.
Also known as antidiuretic hormone or ADH.
Antidiuretic. Okay, breaking that down. Diuretic means making you pee. So antidiuretic means stop peeing.
Precisely. Its job is to conserve water, to stop it from leaving the body.
Where does it come from?
It's synthesized up in the hypothalamus, in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. It then travels down long nerve axons and is stored in the posterior pituitary gland.
Which is like a little hanging sac at the base of the brain.
Exactly. It's like a storage depot. When those osmoreceptors shrink and fire, they send a signal down to the posterior pituitary, release the ADH.
That goes into the blood. Now, Gannon gets really specific about the receptors here. It's not just ADH hits cell, magic happens. There are distinct types of receptors, right?
Right. And this is a classic medical student trap. You have V1 receptors and V2 receptors.
Okay, V1 first. Where are they?
V1 receptors are found in the smooth muscle of blood vessels. When ADH hits them, it causes vasoconstriction. It clamps down the vessels to raise blood pressure. That's why the hormone is also called vasopressin.
It presses on the vessels.
Right, but, and this is key, normally physiological levels of ADH aren't high enough to trigger this. You usually need massive levels, like during a severe hemorrhage, to really activate the V1 receptors.
So V1 is the emergency pressure valve. It's the break glass in case of war receptor.
That's a perfect analogy, but we're talking about day-to-day salt and water balance. That's the V2 receptor domain.
And where are they?
These are located in the kidney, specifically in the walls of the collecting ducts. This is the mechanism that saves your life after you eat those pretzels.
Walk us through the cellular mechanism. ADH floats through the blood, it gets to the kidney, finds a V2 receptor on a collecting duct cell. Then what?
It triggers a signaling cascade. It activates G proteins, increases a molecule called CAMP inside the cell. That's all standard signaling stuff. But the end result is totally unique. It tells the cell to take these little vesicles, these storage bubbles that are floating around inside it, and these bubbles are packed full of special proteins called aquaporin 2.
Aquaporin. Water pore.
Literally a water pore. The cell moves these vesicles to the cell membrane and fuses them, inserting these aquaporins into the wall of the collecting duct.
I love the analogy we use for this. Normally, the collecting duct, the pipe carrying urine out of the kidney, is waterproof. It's a sealed pipe. The water is trapped inside. It flows right through the bladder, and you pee it out.
Right. It is a tight, impermeable tube, but ADH effectively drills holes in the pipe. Those aquaporin 2 channels are literal holes for water. Suddenly, the waterproof pipe becomes permeable. Water, which is inside the pipe, sees the salty environment outside the pipe and rushes out, back into the body.
So the urine volume goes way down, and it gets very dark and concentrated.
Yeah.
And the water is returned to the blood to dilute that salt from the pretzels.
Precisely. You are retaining what we call solute-free water.
Yeah.
You are bringing pure water back on board to fix the salt-to-water ratio.
What happens when this system breaks? Because it feels like a really critical single point of failure.
It is, and there are two main ways it breaks. One is diabetes insipidus. This is where you either don't make ADH, that's central DI, or your kidney's V2 receptors are broken and they just ignore it. That's nephrogenic DI.
So the drill never comes. The pipe stays waterproof.
And you pee a lot. We are not talking about going a few extra times. We are talking about 10, 15, sometimes 20 liters of dilute urine a day.
20 liters. That's 10 of those giant soda bottles.
It's devastating. You have to drink constantly, day and night, just to stay alive. The water just flows right through you. Patients describe an unquenchable, agonizing thirst.
And the opposite problem must exist too.
It does. SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH. This is often seen in things like lung cancer or a brain injury. The body just starts releasing tons of ADH when it shouldn't.
So you drill too many holes. Or you drill them when you don't need to.
You drill holes when you shouldn't, and you retain too much water. You can't get rid of it.
And that dilutes the sodium in your blood.
Leading to a dangerous condition called hyponatremia. Your cells, always obeying the laws of osmosis, start to swell because the ECF, the C around them, is too watery.
And if that happens in the brain?
It's a catastrophe. It can cause seizures, coma, and even death because the skull is a rigid box. It doesn't allow any room for the brain to swell.
It's such a delicate balance. But wait, I want to circle back to something. We said ADH opens the holes in the pipes so water can leave.
Right.
But water only moves if there's a gradient. It only moves if the outside of the pipe is saltier than the inside.
You've hit on the magic trick of the kidney.
If the kidney tissue itself wasn't salty, opening the holes wouldn't do anything. The water would just sit there.
Correct. For ADH to work, the kidney has to build a trap. It has to engineer a salt environment. This leads us to section 3, the engine, the countercurrent multiplier.
I want to pause here because countercurrent multiplier is one of those terms that makes medical students break out in a cold sweat.
It does.
It sounds like a piece of physics equipment. Before we get into the anatomy, give me the concept. What is the kidney actually trying to build here?
It is physics equipment. Think of it this way. The kidney wants to recover water from your urine. To do that, it needs to suck water out of the collecting duct.
Right.
But water has no pump. You cannot grab a water molecule and pull it across a membrane. As we said, water only moves if it is attracted to something, specifically salt.
The osmosis rule. Water follows salt.
Always. So, to suck water out of the urine, the kidney has to build a zone deep inside itself that is incredibly dangerously salty. A hyperosmotic swamp, if you will.
So it's building a salt magnet.
Yes. A very powerful salt magnet. And to build that magnet, it uses this incredible structure called the loop of Henle. Now imagine a U-shaped tube dipping deep into the kidney tissue. Fluid flows down the left side, the descending limb, it turns the corner at the bottom, and then it comes up the right side, the ascending limb.
Okay, I'm visualizing the U-turn down and back up.
Here is the genius of the design. The two sides of the tube have completely different rules. The side going up, the ascending limb, is the engine. It has millions of tiny pumps in its wall, and their only job is to grab salt from the fluid inside the tube and hurl it out into the surrounding tissue.
Okay, so it's desalinating the fluid inside the tube and salting the tissue outside.
Correct. But here's the catch. This side of the tube, the ascending side, is waterproof. It pushes salt out, but it doesn't let water follow. So the tissue outside gets salty, but the pump itself doesn't dilute its own work.
That's clever. That's called the single effect, right?
That's the single effect. But that's just a simple pump. That doesn't explain the multiplier part.
Right. Why is it a multiplier?
Because of what happens on the other side, the descending limb, the side going down. This side has no pumps at all, but it is very permeable to water.
I think I see where this is going.
Yeah.
The fluid goes down into the salty zone that the ascending limb just created.
Bingo. As the fluid flows down, it hits that salty tissue. The water inside the tube says, I want to be near the salt, so it rushes out. This leaves the fluid remaining inside the tube very, very concentrated with salt.
So by the time the fluid hits the bottom of the U-turn,
It is incredibly salty. And guess where that super salty fluid goes next?
it goes around the corner
Yeah.
into the ascending limb, the pump side.
Exactly. And this is the multiplication. Because the pump is now receiving super salty fluid, it has more salt to pump out, which makes the tissue even saltier, which pulls more water out of the descending side, which
Yeah.
makes the fluid delivering salt to the pump even saltier.
It is a positive feedback loop.
It is. It's like a conveyor belt that traps salt at the bottom of the loop. It creates this astonishing gradient that goes from 300 milliosmoles up at the top, same as blood, to over 1,200 milliosmoles at the bottom.
4 times the concentration of blood. That's insane.
It's an incredibly harsh environment. And urea helps too, right? It's not just salt.
Correct. Urea recycling contributes about 40 to 50% of that osmolarity.
Yeah.
The kidney actually recycles urea from the collecting duct back into the loop to help keep that gradient high. It's basically using a waste product as a tool to save water, so bringing it all back to ADH. When ADH drills those holes in the collecting duct, the water rushes out because the loop of Henle has worked so hard to make the destination irresistibly salty.
Exactly. Without the gradient, ADH would be useless. You'd open the holes, but water wouldn't leave because there would be no osmotic pull. The two systems, the hormonal permission slip from ADH and the mechanical engine of the countercurrent multiplier, they must work together.
Fascinating. So that handles tonicity, the concentration of the internal C. But that's only half the story. Now we need to talk about section 4, the defensive volume.
This is a crucial distinction that trips up a lot of students. Tonicity is about the concentration, the ratio of salt to water. Volume is about the total amount of stuff in the tank.
Give us an example to separate them, because if I drink salt water, I feel like I'm changing both.
Okay, sure. Imagine you are a doctor in the ER. If you inject a liter of isotonic saline, that salt water that perfectly matches the body's concentration, into a patient, their osmolarity doesn't change.
Right. The ratio's fine.
The ratio is fine. So the osmoreceptors in the brain don't fire, they stay asleep.
But the patient is bigger. There's more fluid in them.
Exactly. Their volume has increased, they are puffy, they might have edema, their blood pressure might go up.
And conversely, if you bleed, you lose volume. But the blood that's left over has a normal concentration.
Right, so the body needs a completely different set of sensors for this. It can't just use osmoreceptors. It needs to sense stretch and pressure.
The baroreceptors.
Well, we have two types. We have low-pressure receptors, mainly in the atria of the heart and the big pulmonary vessels. They act like volume gauges. If the atria are stretched, the body knows we have too much fluid.
And the high-pressure receptors.
Those are the classic baroreceptors in the carotid sinus in your neck and the aortic arch in your chest. They are constantly monitoring the arterial blood pressure. If pressure drops, they scream, low volume.
Guyton has a chart on sensitivity here, comparing the ADH response to osmolarity versus volume. And it's really telling.
Yes, it tells you everything about the body's priorities. The ADH system is hypersensitive to osmolarity. A 1% change triggers it. But for volume, you usually need about a 10% drop in blood volume before ADH really kicks in to help.
Why the huge difference?
Because a 1% change in cell size is dangerous.
Oh.
But your veins are stretchy. They can handle a little bit of volume loss without major consequences. Volume is the emergency override. The body tolerates volume changes better than concentration changes up to a point.
So if I lose a little blood, ADH might not care that much? But if I lose a lot, ADH joins the fight.
Hmm.
But what is the primary system for volume? If I'm just a little low on volume, what fixes it?
The RAAS, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. This is the heavy artillery of volume defense.
Let's trace the pathway. It starts in the kidney, right?
It starts with these specialized cells called the juxtaglomerular cells, or JG cells. They sit right on the artery that feeds the kidney's filtering units, and they release an enzyme called renin.
And renin is the starter pistol.
It's the starter pistol for the whole race.
Let's talk about the trigger. How does the kidney, which is buried deep in your back, know that I'm bleeding from a wound in my leg? How does it know the global blood pressure has dropped?
That is the miracle of the layout. The kidney doesn't need to know what's happening in your leg. It only cares about what's happening at its own front door. The JG cells act like tiny barometers on the walls of the kidney's own arteries. If the pressure of blood hitting the kidney drops, those cells physically relax. They get floppy. And that floppiness is the trigger to release renin.
That's the mechanical trigger. But there's a chemical one too, right? The macula densa?
Ah, yes. My favorite structure in renal physiology. Imagine a little group of cells sitting inside the kidney tubule, just downstream, watching the fluid flow by. They're literally tasting the salt content of the pre-urine.
What does the salt content tell them about blood pressure? Those seem completely unrelated.
They seem unrelated, but they are linked by speed. If your blood pressure is normal, fluid rushes through the kidney at high speed. It doesn't have much time to be processed.
Okay.
But if your blood pressure drops...
The flow slows down. It becomes a trickle.
Exactly. And because it's moving so slowly, the upstream parts of the tubule have tons of time to suck all the salt out of it. By the time that fluid trickles past the macula densa, it is almost salt-free.
So low salt in the pipe actually means low pressure in the body.
Precisely. The macula densa tastes that low salt and panics. It sends a chemical signal right next door to the JG cells. It screams, "The flow has stopped. Fire the renin."
So renin is released. It finds a protein called angiotensinogen from the liver and chops it into angiotensin I.
Which is physiologically inactive. It's a dud. It just floats around until it gets to the lungs.
And in the lungs, ACE, angiotensin-converting enzyme, turns it into angiotensin II.
And angiotensin II is the star of the show. It is the multi-tool of physiology. It does everything to raise blood pressure.
Like what?
It causes widespread vasoconstriction to shrink the size of the tank, instantly raising pressure. It goes to the brain to trigger thirst and ADH release. It goes directly to the kidney tubules and tells them save sodium. And crucially, it travels to the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys.
To stimulate aldosterone.
Yes. Aldosterone is a steroid hormone. It travels to the principal cells in the collecting duct. Its job is very specific. Save salt.
How does it do that?
It stimulates the sodium-potassium pumps. It tells them to work overtime, sucking sodium out of the urine and back into the blood.
And because water follows salt, saving sodium means saving water, which means restoring volume.
That's the logic. Sodium is the skeleton of ECF volume. If you want to hold on to water in the ECF, you have to hold on to sodium. If you don't have sodium, the water will just enter your cells and you won't restore your blood pressure. Sodium is what holds the water in the tank.
Now, this whole system, RAAS, it's designed to hoard salt and raise pressure. Is there anything that opposes it, or does it just run unchecked until something breaks?
No, there is a counterbalance, a very elegant one. The natriuretic peptides, ANP and BNP.
Atrial natriuretic peptide and brain natriuretic peptide. Although BNP is mostly from the heart ventricles, isn't it?
Correct, despite the name. These are hormones released by the heart muscle itself when it is stretched too much. If you are fluid overloaded, your heart muscle stretches and it releases ANP and BNP into the blood.
And what do?
They are the anti-RAAS. They do the exact opposite. They dilate blood vessels, they inhibit renin, they stop aldosterone, and they tell the kidney to dump sodium into the urine. They are trying to lower the volume.
This is clinically huge. We measure BNP in the hospital all the time to diagnose heart failure.
Right. If a patient's BNP level is high, it means their heart is screaming, "I'm stretched, I'm overloaded." It's a biological distress signal.
Before we leave volume, we have to mention Guyton's favorite concept, pressure natriuresis.
The ultimate stabilizer. It's a beautiful, simple hydraulic principle. If the physical blood pressure in the kidney's capillaries is high, it literally forces fluid and salt out into the urine.
It just overwhelms the system.
It overrides the hormones.
Hmm.
If your blood pressure is 200, your kidneys will dump fluid to try and lower it. Guyton argued that you cannot have chronic hypertension unless this basic physical mechanism is broken or its set point is shifted higher.
It's the fail-safe. If all else fails, high pressure forces fluid out. Okay, so we balance water for tonicity, and we balance sodium for volume. Now we have to move to section 5, potassium, the electrical stakes.
This is where physiology gets really scary really fast.
You said earlier that sodium is the skeleton of volume. What is potassium?
Potassium is the electricity.
We need to stop here because you said something terrifying in our prep for this. You said, if my sodium is off, I get a headache. If my potassium is off, I drop dead. Why? What is it about potassium that makes it the grim reaper of electrolytes?
It comes down to electricity. You know how every cell in your body is essentially a tiny battery?
It has a charge, a positive-negative pole, right?
Right. The resting membrane potential. It's the voltage charge across the cell membrane that lets your nerves fire and your heart beat. Well, potassium is the single most important ion that sets the baseline voltage for that battery.
It sets the charge.
It sets the charge. And here's the problem. The body keeps 98% of all its potassium inside the cells. It's locked away in the vault in the sanctuary.
Yeah.
The amount floating in your blood, the ECF, is tiny. It's minuscule. We're talking like 4 milliequivalents per liter in the blood compared to 140 inside the cell.
So the ratio of inside to outside is massive.
Huge. And the math of electricity, the Nernst equation, it relies entirely on that ratio. So if you eat a banana and all that potassium stays in your blood, raising your blood level from 4 to, say, 8.
That doesn't sound like that much. You're just going from 4 to 8.
You just doubled the concentration in the ECF. You just destroyed the ratio. In electrical terms, you have depolarized the battery. You've short-circuited it.
And what does that do to the heart?
It prevents it from resetting. The heart muscle contracts, and then it can't relax to fire again. It effectively locks up. It stops in diastole. It's a fatal arrhythmia.
So this isn't about nutrition. This is about preventing your heart from short-circuiting.
It is moment-to-moment electrical survival, and that's why the body has panic buttons for potassium that it doesn't have for anything else.
So what happens when I eat that banana? The potassium hits my blood. Why don't I die?
Because of the defense lines. First is buffering. We can't wait for the kidneys to pee it out. That takes hours. We need to hide it now. So immediately after a meal, the body shoves the potassium inside the cells to hide it from the ECF.
What drives it in?
Insulin. We usually think of insulin for glucose, but it is absolutely critical for potassium. After a meal, insulin drives K+ into cells. Epinephrine does the same thing. If you're exercising and your muscles release K+ the bar, epinephrine pushes it back in so your heart doesn't stop.
Yeah, what pushes it out?
Acidosis. This is a classic board exam concept. If your blood is acidic, meaning too many H+ ions, the cells will suck in the H+ to buffer the acid, but to maintain electrical charge balance, they have to spit something positive out.
And that's potassium.
That's potassium. So diabetic ketoacidosis often presents with a dangerously high potassium level, a hyperkalemia.
Okay, so buffering buys us time. But eventually the kidney has to excrete the daily load from food.
Right. And here we meet the principal cells again, in the collecting duct. The kidney handles potassium in a really interesting way. The proximal tubule, the early part, reabsorbs almost all of it automatically without thinking. The fine-tuning happens at the very end.
So the kidney decides at the last minute how much to pee out based on body levels.
Exactly. If your potassium is high, the principal cells secrete it. They actively pump it from the blood into the urine to get rid of it.
And what controls that secretion?
2 main things. 1, the concentration itself. High potassium in the blood directly stimulates the pumps. But the big one is, 2, aldosterone.
Wait, aldosterone again? I thought it was a salt saver.
It is. But look at the name of the pump it activates. The Na+K+ATPase.
Sodium-potassium pump.
It pumps sodium in from the urine, saving salt. And it pumps potassium out into the urine, excreting K+E. So aldosterone is the hormone for save salt, dump potassium.
That is such a crucial link. It explains why patients on ACE inhibitors, which block the RAAS system and therefore block aldosterone, can get high potassium.
Exactly. You block the dump mechanism. This is why you have to monitor potassium so carefully in heart failure patients who are on these life-saving drugs.
Let's bring this all together in our last section, integration, when systems collide. Let's talk about heart failure again.
Yeah.
It seems like the perfect tragic storm of these systems getting confused.
It is the ultimate physiological tragedy. In heart failure, the heart muscle, the pump, is weak, so it can't generate enough arterial pressure. Blood pressure drops.
Okay. So the high-pressure baroreceptors are unhappy.
They're screaming low pressure, and the body interprets this signal as low volume. It thinks you are bleeding to death, so what does it do?
It activates the RAS.
It activates the RAS. You get renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. You start hoarding salt and water. You activate the sympathetic nervous system. You clamp down vessels. You retain every drop of fluid you can.
But the patient is already overloaded. They have edema, their legs are swollen, their lungs are full of fluid.
Exactly. The internal sea is flooding, but the sensors, because they rely on pressure, not actual volume, think the tank is empty. So the kidney keeps saving water, which makes the edema worse, which stretches the failing heart even more, which makes the pump failure worse. It is a vicious, deadly cycle.
The kidney is food.
It is. It's doing its job perfectly according to its programming, but the input data is wrong. It thinks it's saving you from dehydration, but it's actually drowning you.
Let's look at another scenario where the system works perfectly. Hemorrhage. A true volume loss.
This is where the systems work in beautiful harmony. The immediate phase, within milliseconds, sympathetics, clamp the vessels, make the heart beat faster and harder to maintain pressure.
The intermediate phase.
That's the RAAS and ADH response. Stop the leaks, hold on to every drop of water and salt.
And long term.
Thirst and salt appetite. You have to physically replace the lost matter. The brain drives you to crave water and crave salty foods. You have to refill the tank from the outside.
This brings us to the outro. We've covered the layout, the defense of tonicity with water, the defense of volume with salt, and the electrical stability with potassium.
It really is environmental engineering. We aren't just memorizing hormones. We are looking at how a collection of helpless, fragile cells maintains a livable habitat for themselves in what is actually a very hostile universe.
And the so what, for our listeners, what's the takeaway?
I think it's realizing that every time you eat a bag of chips or go for a run or just skip a glass of water, this silent, incredible machinery kicks into gear. The osmoreceptors in your brain are shrinking, the hypothalamus is firing, the kidney is drilling holes in its pipes. It is happening right now while you listen to this. Your body is constantly fighting for equilibrium.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. We talked about salt appetite. Humans have a robust, powerful drive to eat salt.
We do. We crave it.
But in nature, for most of human evolution, salt was scarce. We evolved to find it and hoard it. The RAS system is a salt-hoarding machine. But now, we live in a world of abundance. Salt is everywhere. It's cheap. It's in everything.
And we are still running the old software, the scarcity software.
Exactly. How much of our modern plague of hypertension and heart disease is simply our ancient physiology engineered for scarcity clashing with a modern environment of infinite salt? We are survival machines creating our own pathology.
We are fish who have learned how to make the water in our own tank too salty.
That is a thought to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.